This is Fans on the Run, a podcast made by, for, and about Beatles fans. And now, here's your host, Ethan Alexanian.
Welcome back, everyone, to the show. I'm Ethan Alexanian. That's Alexanian for some of you who may not be able to pronounce it right. While I'm very appreciative of Kid O'Toole's shout-out in one of the last episodes of her show that she co-hosts, Talk More Talk, she said my last name very, very wrong. I love you, Kit, but it's Alexanian. Anyways, enough about that. We've got a great show for you today. The person we've got with us today is the person who I consider my kind of gateway into the wonderful world of Beatle fans that I met at the Beatlefest. She was kind of the first one I met, and she kind of took me under her wing. And welcome to the show, Susan Ryan. Susan, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ethan. Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here. Finally get to talk to you for your podcast, and it's going to be a very interesting conversation and an exciting afternoon.
Hopefully. Now, here's everyone's favorite part of the show. Susan, do you have a book coming out, perhaps?
Actually, yes. So one of the things I do, I live in New York City, and I live in the Bronx at the moment, but I'm a native New Yorker, born and raised in Queens, lived in Manhattan for 22 years, now live in the Northwest Bronx. And one of the things I do is I'm the tour guide and owner of Fab 4 NYC Walking Tours, which is Beatles-related walking tours of New York City. So if you're ever in New York and you want a tour of Beatles sites, and there are plenty more of them besides Strawberry Fields and the Dakota. People don't realize that.
I was planning on taking one of your tours early April before the coronavirus thing happened, when I was going to see Elton John at Madison Square Garden, but that all went up in the air.
Kind of went down the tubes. Yeah, I had to actually get in touch with somebody right when this first started. I was supposed to have a family from out of town come, and I had to write to them and go, I don't think you want to come to New York right now. And they canceled their trip. But yeah, so I do these tours, and actually been doing them for close to 15 years. And one of the things, the book, now that I'm getting back to the original question, the book is
the question was just a segue.
I know, but I kind of went off on it because it's what I do. No, I'm sorry. But anyway, the thing is that I am working on a book right now with two of my fellow tour guides, David Bedford in Liverpool and Richard Porter in London. David is one of several Liverpool tour guides that I know, and Richard does the London Beatles walks in London, and they're friends who I've known for a very, very long time. And the three of us are collaborating on a book that was supposed to come out this summer, but obviously it's been put on hold because of the whole pandemic, and our publisher had to put people on furlough for a while and things like that. So it's on hold until I don't know when.
Yeah.
But we're working on a book called The Beatles Fab 4 Cities. And it's going to be about Beatles sites and history in Liverpool, Hamburg, London, and New York. And I wrote the New York section. So Richard and David worked on the Hamburg section with another tour guide in Hamburg, and then they each wrote the sections about Liverpool and London. And it's going to have sort of history about various sites, including ones that we don't always cover on our tours. And, if all goes well, it'll come out before the end of the year. If all does not go well, it'll come out beginning of next year. But it really depends on how
it will come out.
Oh, it will. It will. I mean, we submitted the manuscript. They're working on the photos. The editor is editing. So, it's just that everything kind of slowed way down,
I'm going to need to pick myself up a copy of this when this comes out. This sounds really cool.
It'll be a great book. It'll be a lot of fun. We are all experts on our respective cities and the Beatles connections therein. So it's kind of a way to get it all together and talk about the four cities that formed the Beatles.
What's your favorite Beatles site to take people to on your tours in New York?
There are a couple. Well, obviously, the obvious one is Strawberry Fields because everybody wants to go there. It's the tribute to John Lennon when he died. The city of New York wanted to do something in his memory, and this section, 1.5 acre section of the park directly across the street from the Dakota, was the logical place to put a tribute. And the Parks Department and Yoko Ono worked to create this living memorial. So it's definitely one of my favorite places to take people. People always want to go there.
With the iconic mosaic on the ground and some part of it.
Exactly. And there's a dedication plaque. It's beautiful there, you know. So, and yes, I've had people get very emotional when they go, you know, because it is, of course, where fans gather on John's birthday in October and on the anniversary of his death in December. This year I don't know what's going to happen come October, December, was, of course, going to be a real biggie because 80th birthday and 40 years since John's death. So it was going to be a big deal, but I have no idea what's going to be by October and December. So we shall see. But that's probably one of my favorite places. Another place I like to take people is the Plaza Hotel, actually, because people like to see it, and you know, they like to hear about what it was like when the Beatles were there, and they also, you know, it's also the place where we usually take a pit stop, so we get to go downstairs into the food court, and people can get, you know, a black and white cookie and, you know, enjoy themselves and get a little New York food and hang out. So the Plaza is kind of fun. Yeah. You know. So.
Do you take people to where Murray the K used to broadcast from?
No, I do not. I am not even actually sure where that studio was. I should know that, and I don't. The tour basically covers Midtown Manhattan and the Upper West Side. There are some locations that we can't get to, which are actually going to be mentioned in the book because we can't get to them on my tour. Because the tour that I do is strictly walking. So in order to be able to walk, we have to have a reasonable distance. I can't take people like down to Greenwich Village or up to Harlem because it's not walkable. It would involve getting on a subway. But, you know, I can create a tour for somebody. If somebody really wanted something personal, I could do something. But mostly, no, I just go to sort of iconic places in Midtown Manhattan.
All right. So I think we should talk a little bit more about you, Susan.
Okay.
When did you first discover the Beatles?
Okay, so I am what friends of mine about my age have described as a first and a half generation fan. I'm a first generation fan by a technicality. Okay. My mother says that I was in the room when they were on Ed Sullivan in 1964. I was just past my second birthday. I do not remember it at all. So I have to take my mother's word for it. I do know that we moved from the apartment.
If it makes you feel better, I don't remember it at all either.
There you go. There you go. You know, if you did, I'd be real surprised.
Yeah.
I would say that it was in another lifetime, you know. But no, I mean, I know we moved from the apartment I lived in as a baby to the house that I basically grew up in the following weekend. So we moved into the house on February 14th, and my mother said that she was busy packing boxes and things while watching Ed Sullivan, and that I was in the room on the playpen. So I, of course, do not remember this at all. So my earliest memory of the Beatles is probably from when I was around 4 years old, 1965. I remember hearing the song "We Can Work It Out" on the radio. You know, it's got that sort of iconic hook in the middle of the part that goes, "Life is very short," et cetera, et cetera. Very memorable. I was a little kid. I remember hearing that when I was a child. That's my earliest Beatles memory. Becoming a fan, though, the reason I say first and a half is that I was around in the 60s. So I remember hearing that song on the radio. I remember seeing Yellow Submarine in the movie theater when it was new and I was about 7. Things like that. But became a big fan in the 70s. So 1975, the summer before my 14th birthday, So I'm giving away my age, which I really don't care at this point. I went to summer camp out on Long Island. So there was this girl on our bus at the summer camp that my brother and I went to. She was a little older than I was. I was just shy of 14, so I was 13 years old, and turned 14 that fall. And she asked me if I liked the Beatles, and I said, well, yeah, I guess. And she said, oh, well, if you like the Beatles, you have to listen to this record, and you have to listen to this album, you have to read this book, and you have to do this, that, and the other thing. And I was hooked. She loaned me records, stuff like that. And that fall, after I started ninth grade, which at the time was still middle school. My middle school went 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade. They were showing the movie A Hard Day's Night at the local library. This was before the days of DVDs and being able to own a movie or being able to call it up on demand. You know, it was the olden days. And, well, it was definitely the olden days. And my friend and I went to see A Hard Day's Night at the local public library in Fresh Meadows, Queens. And it was the first time I'd seen them sort of walking, talking, moving. You know, the only other time I'd ever seen a Beatles movie was Yellow Submarine, which is not really the Beatles. So there you go. And
what are you talking about? They appeared for what, 30 seconds at the end?
Something like, yeah, but you know, that doesn't make much of an impression on an 8-year-old kid, a 7-year-old kid. But anyway, there they were up on the screen, you know, walking, talking, moving, laughing. Now, I will freely admit that I was 14 almost. Well, I was 14, just about 14, and I saw one thing and one thing only. It was like tunnel vision. I saw John Lennon, and that was it. I didn't see. It took years before I saw the rest of that movie, and I'm not going to lie. People who know me know this, so it's not a surprise. And I thought he was the best thing I'd ever seen in my life. And I still think that, but that's something else again. The 45 odd year habit is, or 45 very odd year habit to break.
I see what anyway, you did there.
See, you know, I try to be clever. It doesn't always work. But anyway, it was kind of like tunnel vision. It was what I saw. I loved the movie. I thought it was great. And really got into it from there. Books, records, made lists. I had lists of all the albums that I needed to buy in what order I needed to buy them. And I would save my babysitting money and I would buy albums as they came out. Now, for my 14th birthday, though, because I didn't own any Beatles records at this point, but my 14th birthday, that October, my parents got me the red album and the blue album. So the Beatles 1962 to 1966 and 1967 to 70. Those were fairly new at the time. They had come out maybe a year or two before. And they were sort of good all-purpose introductions to the Beatles. Like a lot of people got introduced with the one album, same kind of thing.
Yeah.
And my parents bought me those albums for my 14th birthday. And I bought myself a Beatles album for my 14th birthday. There was a used record store near where my mother worked at the time. And they had used records in bins, and they had a monophonic copy of Meet the Beatles, the Beatles' first American release, for 50 cents.
Not bad.
And I bought it. Yeah, and I bought it. I still have it. That's my copy of Meet the Beatles. I grew up on the American albums. Okay, it was before the CDs came out, and before British albums were readily available in the U.S. So I grew up on the American albums, and I bought that album for myself when I turned 14 for $50. So,
I was curious when you said you had a list of which Beatles albums you needed to buy in a specific order. What order?
Well, I tried to buy them in chronological order.
Okay.
It didn't always work out that way.
Yeah.
There were record stores. I had a bunch of places where I'd buy records. Okay, I miss record stores. Man, do I miss record stores? You know, I just all the places that I used to buy records are gone. And there was a record store right in my neighborhood called the Music Box. It was a little independent record store, and I used to buy records from them. And then there was another record store that was I lived off of Main Avenue, and there was down the avenue that I could get to by bus. There was another place called Fox Hollow Records.
Okay.
And they used to have sales, and I used to buy records from them. But the big one there was a department store here in New York. People from New York City will remember, called E.J. Korvette's. And Korvette's was a department store that had everything. So they had clothing and they had...
I know of Korvettes.
You know about Korvettes. Okay, so they had everything. But they had a record department. And twice a year or so, they would have what they called their all-label sale. And all albums, no matter what label, no matter what artist, were $2.99 or $3.99. And I used to save up my babysitting money so that when Korvette had their all-label sale, I would be able to go, because there was a Korvette that I could get to by bus. And I would go and I would buy as many albums as I had money for. And the reason it didn't always happen in chronological order was because sometimes I had to go by what they had, you know? And so it didn't always happen in strictly chronological order because, you know, if I needed Rubber Soul and they didn't have it and they had, you know, Sgt. Pepper, well, I'd buy what I could get, you know. Also, it was in the days of the early solo catalog, so I was also buying those. So I had a list of those as well, you know, to buy, you know, early solo releases. So that's basically, I kept lists, you know, and I would check them off. And then when I had these record holders in my room and you kind of stack the albums and flip through them like you did in a record store. And I kept them in chronological order and then alphabetical order by artist and chronological order by, you know, chronology of the artist, etc. I was very, 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 very obsessive about this.
That's exactly how I have my record set up right now.
There you go. It's the smart way to do it.
Yeah. Although with the Beatles, it gets a little bit more specific because I have them divided up by country.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I have some really weird imports, like not just British ones. I have.
Ooh, do tell.
Well, a number of years ago, a friend of mine was getting rid of his record collection, and he didn't want to just sell it, so he gave it to me. Hook, line, and sinker. Gave me the whole thing. I did tell him before he did. I said, listen, some of this stuff is valuable, and I don't want to just take it off your hands if you don't realize it's valuable. And he looked at me and he said, are you going to sell it? And I said, no. He said, no, then take it. So he gave me this whole record collection, and he had been in the service, so he had picked up records in weird places. Like I have a Venezuelan pressing of the Help album.
Oh.
And I have a German pressing of the collection of Beatles oldies, you know, stuff that didn't come out in the States. And then I have the box set, the British box set with the book of Let It Be.
Oh, that's worth quite a penny now.
It is, and especially if the book is not falling apart, and this book is not falling apart.
Yeah,
and it's in its sleeve with its little box that you sort of put the book into, you know, sits in the box. And
one more reason for me to flaunt my Canadian nationality: the box set did come out in Canada.
There you go. It didn't come out here, but he picked it up. I forget where he said he picked it up. He may have picked it up when he was in the service, like not in England, somewhere in Turkey or something. But but yeah, I have some weird pressings of things. Not a lot, but some stuff is just strange. You know, because I got it from this guy.
You know, in case you ever want to go full digital, I know someone who'd be willing to take them off your hands.
I know. You know what? I'm sorry. I just know.
You know, no, it's worth a shot. It's worth a shot.
Always worth an ask and always worth a no. But yeah, those are, you know, I have, and then now, of course, I've got the CDs, of course. But, you know, it's funny. When you grow up on the American albums, and you can ask this about first generation fans or people like me who before digital, okay, I am pretty good about telling you what songs are on what albums if you ask me about the American albums, and to this day I still get really confused as to what is on the British or the CDs because they're so completely different. Like Rubber Soul is such a completely different album. I cannot to this day tell you exactly what is on the CD because it's the British pressing and I have no idea. Yeah, it's a completely different record. So I get confused.
I was thinking about this last night as I was lying in bed. Was From Me to You on any U.S. album?
I do not believe so. Or maybe it was. Maybe it was on Introducing the Beatles. I'm going to look. I've got my records right here, so I'm going to see if I can pull it out. It's here someplace. I have so many.
You have to send me pictures of some of these weird imports because I'd like to see them.
I will have to do that. Oh, now these are all. Somebody's been touching these because I don't know where they are. Introducing the Beatles. I can't even see anymore. Anyway, it's. I think it may have been on Introducing the Beatles, which was on V-Day. So here we go. I've got the album. From Me to You. No, it's not on there.
Shocking.
It's not. Yeah.
This just in.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's not on there, but yeah, I don't think it was actually on an American album. Now that I think about it, the thing about the American albums, I think you probably know this, but the American albums didn't have the single. I mean, did have the single on them. British albums didn't. The singles were released as singles or EPs. So the American albums, the American Capitol executives felt that they had to put the single on the album in order. Good old
Dave Dexter Jr.
Pretty much, yeah. And I mean, it's interesting, and I'm sure you've read various books like Bruce Spizer's books, and have you read Piers Hemingson's Beatles in Canada?
I don't have his book, but he is my next guest next week.
Well,
so
now a lot of stuff.
Now I feel a little embarrassed.
No, don't be embarrassed. He's a great guy. He's terrific. He actually does Beatles tours in Toronto too.
Oh.
And I've done his tour. We were in Toronto. I was in Toronto last year with Janet Davis, who our friend from the fest, and she and I Piers took us around and took us on a Beatles tour of Toronto, which was pretty awesome, actually.
See, that's how I know you're not from Toronto, because you're pronouncing the last T.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, it's
Toronto.
Yeah, it's like Toronto.
Yes, but no.
Yeah. Anyways,
hey, I'm from New York. What do you want?
Yeah.
But
I can't even name all of the boroughs, so I can't blame you for anything.
We have to work on you. I'm just you and I will talk. No. Anyway. Yeah, so the Beatles' history in Canada, of course, was very, very different, which you will find out when you talk to Piers.
Well, I know we got the Beatles on Capitol like a full year before you guys did.
You did.
And we got
the
entire With the Beatles album,
yes.
Even before I Want to Hold Your Hand came out in the States.
Yes. And it was interesting because one of the things I learned when I read Pierce's book and when I met him was that there were Beatles fan clubs in Canada long before they were in the United States. And actually, when the Beatles were on the Ed Sullivan Show, they imported girls from Canada who were running Beatles fan clubs to sign American girls up to form fan club chapters.
Really?
So they brought girls to New York from Canada to try and get other girls to form fan club chapters in the United States.
Really? I did not know that.
I never knew that either. The history that American fans think they know is the history of the Beatles in the United States, but the history of the Beatles in North America is very different. And I never knew 40 years of being a fan, and I never knew any of this till I met Piers. So,
well, and I know not only did the Beatles records come out, they had, I think it was like a top 20 hit with She Loves You.
Yeah.
Well before I Want to Hold Your Hand came out.
Yep. And it's stuff that when you think you know it, you don't know it, because it's again, and I'm going to say it, and I'm saying this to you, you're Canadian, it's that American arrogance about the only history of North America that matters is that in the United States, which is not true. I mean, I have connections to Canada on many levels, including the fact that my son went to university in Canada. So I try not to have that, U.S. arrogance about North America. But unfortunately, when it comes to Beatles fandom, there's a lot that American fans don't know and don't realize. And I am forever grateful to Piers for putting out his book, for correcting that history, because it's important that it be correct. And I think that the more we know, the better it is.
Exactly. I love being Canadian.
Right this minute, I'd like to be Canadian myself.
Oh, we'd welcome you. Well, I'd welcome you.
Well, I'd go. If I could go, I'd go. Trust me. Anyway.
Actually, now that I think about it, us Canadians got the better end of the deal for most of the British invasion bands. Like, the arrogant Capitol Records executive in the US turned down everybody, so they ended up all on, like, Epic Records and MGM. But here in Canada, all on Capitol, we had the Hollies, the Dave Clark Five, Manfred Mann.
Yeah.
Because Alan White, I think his name.
No, Alan White's somebody else.
Oh, Alan White is the Paul White?
Yeah, somebody. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, and I don't have the book in front of me. But
yeah.
But yeah, it was the executives in Canada were a lot more receptive to what British Capital was sending them, and it was the prerogative of the labels, the various labels in other countries, whether or not to accept something that was being sent to them from Britain. And the Canadian executives said, sure, we'll release it. And the American executives said, heck no, we won't release that.
And that's why Capitol Records lost out on probably like hundreds of millions of dollars.
You better believe it.
Because they could have had all of the British invasion bands signed on their label.
Yep. And who knew? You know, I mean, the thing is that back in the day, they thought it was a flash in the pan. So they were just waiting for it to all collapse. It didn't.
Yeah.
You know, but
when's the bubble gonna burst?
Exactly. And when it didn't collapse, I think it was as much of a shock to them as it was to some other people. But those of us who are music fans know better. You know, we can spot it a mile away, you know, that it wasn't going to collapse so quick, you know.
So, what does it mean to you? Or, wait, no. What do the Beatles mean to you?
Oh, that's a deep question. You know, the Beatles mean more to me than I can even probably say. First of all, my life wouldn't be the same was I not a Beatles fan. Okay, if not for that girl, Debbie, and I can't remember her last name to save my life, but that girl that I met when I was 14.
Debbie What's-Her-Face.
Yeah, Debbie What's-Her-Face from Long Island, and that's all I can tell you.
Shout out to Debbie What's-Her-Face from Long Island if you're listening.
I know about 3 Debbie What's-Her-Faces from Long Island, maybe more, but not that one. I lost track of her a long time ago. But anyway, if not for her, I wouldn't be the fan I am. But the thing is, okay, I've met so many people. You're among them, okay? I'm you know, right to this very day. I have met so many people that I am really good friends with, that I am, that I'm close to, that I have lifelong friendships with, because I'm a Beatles fan. I've met more people because I've been going to the fest since 1977. My first New York Beatlefest was 1977. So it was 3 years after it started in 1974. And I met Mark Lapidus, who runs the fest, when I was, 15 years old. So I know him forever. Just
I met Mark Lapidus when I was 16.
There you go. So and now you know him, and you always will.
I don't know him that well. I think
we'll rectify that.
we had a very brief conversation, but I would like to get him on the podcast sometime.
I think he would be glad to do it. You just have to get a hold of him.
I'm friends with him on Facebook.
Yeah, he doesn't always check Facebook, but you talk to me. We'll see what we can do.
Okay.
I'll at least, if you can't get a hold of him, I'll help you. But anyway, 'cause I bet he would do this podcast for you. I really think he would probably enjoy it.
And I'd love to ask him about the early days at the fest.
Oh, he would love to talk about that. He will absolutely love to talk about that. He loves to tell the stories. So it would be really cool.
I'd love to hear the stories.
He has good ones. I'm not going to give them away because they're his stories. But yeah, I mean, but I met so many people that I'm close to, so many people that I'm friends with. It's really funny because this is more recent, but I came across a photo the other day that was taken at Beatlefest 2003, and there's about 9 or 10 people in the picture, and I am still friends with every single one of them. And it was taken at the Chicago Fest in 2003.
Wow, that was a year after I was born. Sorry I couldn't make it.
Well, you made up for it, though. You showed up later on.
With my one to-date appearance.
This is not going to be your last.
It will not. It will certainly be not.
It's nice. The fest is wonderful because, as I described it to my brother at one point, who didn't really understand. He was living in Illinois a number of years ago, and or in Wisconsin, and he came to Chicago for the weekend. That happened to be the weekend of the fest, so he came into the fest for a couple of hours to see me. And he'd never seen me at a fest; he'd never been to one. And I warned him before he showed up. I said, "Now, I am not the person you think you know when I'm at the fest." I said, "Because the fest is where I sing the song of my people." And it's true. It's true. I mean,
it is true.
Yeah.
I have a hard time explaining it to my friends.
Yeah, it can be very hard to explain, but it's where you find your people. And so being a Beatles fan means a lot to me because there are people that are near and dear to me, and things that I've done that I never would have done, and music that I like that I never would have known about had I not become a Beatles fan. So in many, many ways, I am the person that I am because I'm a Beatles fan.
What kind of music would you not have discovered?
50s music, a lot of it. Probably would never have really cared very much about Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, Carl Perkins, all those people, Little Richard, just stuff that the Beatles liked. So I wanted to know what it was all about, and I listened to it. 50s music took me a while. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
But now I love it. And
it's still taking me a while. Like, I like Buddy Holly, and I like Little Richard, but that's about it so far.
Oh, we got to work on you.
Not a big Elvis guy.
Well, that's an acquired taste. I'm not going to lie to you, but if you really, I'm gonna recommend this to you because I have a box set of Elvis the 50s Masters.
Okay.
So it's all his 50s stuff in chronological order.
Okay.
And it's worth picking up if you can download it or get the CDs or something. But
it's probably on Spotify.
It's probably there somewhere, yeah. And I actually got the box of CDs because at the time I got it when it came out, I was working for EMG Music, which owns RCA Records. So we could get a lot of booty when we work for the record company, they give you lots of premiums, and that was one. Anyway, listen to it in chronological order, and it will blow your mind. It will blow your mind.
The slow deterioration of Elvis?
No, it's not a deterioration because this is the 50s. This is the 50s Masters from the beginning to the end of the 50s, before the Army, and when he was still literally the king of rock and roll. He wasn't a Las Vegas lounge act, and he wasn't making cheesy movies. This was Elvis in his purest form.
Like just fresh off of Sun Records.
Yes. And when you listen to that stuff, it will change your mind. It will change your life. And I don't exaggerate. It will absolutely change your life and your mind because he was something to behold.
Hopefully.
No, he was. Trust me on this one.
No, I mean, hopefully I'll like it.
I think you will. You just have to listen to it with open ears and an open mind, but you'll understand. You'll understand because it's what John Lennon and Paul McCartney heard when they were your age. So you will understand better what they heard and what they saw.
Fair.
Okay. But yeah, so that's what being a Beatles fan means to me. It's that my life would not be what it is. My friends would not be who they are.
What is your favorite memory involving the Beatles or of being a Beatles fan?
I've got several. First of all, the one about hearing the music when I was a little kid. So, that one, earliest memory. Going to fests. My first fest, this is actually a really cool memory. 1977, so I was 15. It was February. They used to do the New York fests in February. It used to be over George Harrison's birthday weekend. And my father had read something about this Beatles convention in the newspaper. and there was a phone number to call if you wanted information, and it was Mark Lapidos's office in New Jersey. And it's, I believe, still the same phone number. But anyway, my dad took it upon himself to call this crazy man in New Jersey and ask him if it was going to be safe for his 15-year-old daughter to go to this lunatic thing. And I guess Mark gave him the right answer because my dad allowed me to go. But I was only allowed to go on Saturday. I was only allowed to go during the day. And I had to go with my friend, and my parents had to drive me and my friend into Manhattan and pick us up. We weren't allowed to ride the subway. This was New York in the 70s. You didn't ride the subway.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean,
even nowadays, I've had some experiences on the subway in New York.
It depends where you go, you know. I mean, I ride the subway all the time, so I'm biased. But yeah, New York subway can be an experience. But in the 70s, it was a dangerous experience.
Oh, yeah.
And I went to the fest with my friend. Back then, the game was that you saved up as much money as you could, which was usually somewhere around $50. Okay, that was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And you went to the fest with $50. And then you went to the dealer room.
Oh.
And you saw how much how much stuff you could buy, and how much of that $50 would still be in your pocket when you left.
And none of it would be. I'm assuming.
No, a lot of it would be.
What?
I was very good at buying stuff and coming home with $35.
How?
Because stuff wasn't worth anything in 1975. It was passé. It was not worth anything. It was, people didn't realize anyone wanted it. And it was before any of them were dead. And they had broken up 5 years before.
Sweet Jesus.
And nobody cared. I mean, you know, I remember being able to go to garage sales and buy stuff for $0.25. You know,
I went to the Beatles. I brought $400 with me to the fest.
Yeah.
And all I got were a couple records.
Yeah, that's what it's like now. But in the mid 70s, I remember going to garage sale with my folks, and we weren't looking for Beatles things, by the way. We were just going to garage sale, and I picked up a copy of the Beatles Flip Your Wig Game, all parts intact, for $0.25. And I picked up.
Do you still have that?
Oh, I still have it. Yes, it's worth. I mean, the box is a little torn, but it's still worth probably $300, $400.
Yeah.
And I picked up the two novelizations of Help in a Hard Day's Night, the little paperback books, for 10 cents a piece, and they were in perfect condition. So we spent 45 cents.
45 cents, and you got the Beatles Flip Your Wig Game and the two novelizations.
Yes, 45 cents. Well, at that very first fest in 1977, in the last part of the dealer room was a whole long ballroom that had been opened up, and the last vendor that I went to, in the back of the last room, had a vintage I Love John button, the big, like, 3-inch round button, you know. And he wanted $2 for it, and I bought it. It was probably some of the money that I came home with, you know, $2. And after John's death, somebody offered me at a fest, because I was wearing it one time, offered me $200 cash on the barrelhead, and I said no. So I still have the button.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that kind of thing, being able to buy.
I will give you $4. That's twice your investment.
The dollar's worth more, baby, now. No, it's
$6, no more. That's my final offer.
And I'm going to say no, sweetheart.
I'm crushed.
You know, I'm sorry to, like, crush your dreams, but there you go.
That's business.
But yeah, but being able to buy Beatles stuff cheap, that was fun. And just I got lots of weird Beatles stories, man. I got tons. I got a weird Strawberry Fields story. If you want it, I can tell you.
That kind of ties into my next question. What's your favorite weird piece of Beatles trivia?
Beatles trivia.
Or tell your Strawberry Fields story.
Yeah, because weird trivia is kind of, I don't really know, because I mean, the trivia is what I consider trivia, what other people consider trivia, maybe two different things.
Okay.
But the weird Strawberry Fields story is I tend to not go on the anniversary of John's death, and that's mostly because I live here. I can go anytime I want, and it's way too crowded, and every weirdo in New York City shows up, and I'm just like, I don't have the head or the stomach for it. So I generally do not go on December 8th. I go any other time of year. I don't even do tours on December 8th because you can't get into Strawberry Fields to talk about it. So why bother? There's like one day that I won't do a tour. I'll do a tour on holiday, but I won't do a tour on December 8th. But anyway, tangentially. So in 1985, sorry. I was talking about the 70s before. 1985, a friend of mine came up from Florida to visit. We were going to a concert at Madison Square Garden, having nothing to do with the Beatles at all. It was a radio station Christmas concert. And she came up and she wanted to go to Strawberry Fields on December 8th. So I said, sure, why not? So we went. And while we were there, this was before it was an organized gathering with organizers, and it was only just usually a few fans would show up, maybe 25 people. It was not a lot of people. And it was freezing, and we'd stand there freezing our butts off and whatever. I took her, and we went. And we got to chatting with this guy while we were in Strawberry Fields. And he was a youngish guy. Maybe he was a little older than we were, but not by much. Maybe he was, maybe he was in his early to late 20s like we were. And he was going on about Yoko Ono. He loved Yoko. He was crazy about Yoko. He was talking about how much he admired her as an artist, how he admired her as a person. Yoko, which was fine. If you're a Yoko fan, hey. We're talking to this guy, and it got really cold. And at one point, we went down the street to get some coffee or hot chocolate because we were freezing. And we came back, and there was nothing particularly remarkable about this fella, except that he really liked Yoko, which was fine. And the only thing I can tell you is he bore a physical resemblance. This was not who he was. Okay, I don't remember his name, but he bore a slightly physical resemblance to David Johansen of the New York Dolls.
Okay,
he had that kind of elfin face, And in fact, he said people would remark on that all the time. By the way, I met David Johansen years later. Nice guy. That's total tangential thing. But anyway, not this guy, but he had that kind of look, And
well, we just gave all the glam rock fans out there their fix.
There you go. But this guy had that kind of, it was enough of a resemblance that he was memorable for that reason. Okay. And we went our separate ways after that evening, and my friend eventually went back to Florida. About 3 weeks or so later, she calls me up and she goes, "Oh my God, are you watching the news?" So I said, "No." She goes, "You have to turn on CBS News like now." So I put on the TV, and there is our friend from Strawberry Fields getting arrested for attempting to break into Yoko's apartment. He was stalking her.
Oh, damn.
So, yeah, and she was like, "Isn't that the guy that we were hanging out with on December 8th? And I'm like, "Hell yeah. Oh, my God." So, yeah, it was that's my kind of weird Strawberry Fields story. Yeah, it was definitely strange. But, yeah, he was arrested for stalking Yoko in 1985. So.
Wow.
You meet all kinds of people, I'll tell you.
Is that more of a Beatles fan story or more of a New York story?
Both. Because if you weren't in Strawberry Fields, you wouldn't be if you weren't a Beatles fan, you wouldn't be in Strawberry Fields.
Yeah.
On that day, necessarily. But yes, it's a New York story too. I mean, I got those as well. Unfortunately, I don't have any New York stories involving John.
No.
I never saw him. I tried. My husband saw him once, though.
Never crossed paths.
No, and it wasn't for lack of trying. I used to wait outside the Dakota all the time on school holidays. I drag my friends into Manhattan, and they go, "I want to go Lennon stalking," and I'd be like, "Well, I do." So, and we'd stand outside of the Dakota, but he would have just left or just come back, so we never did see him.
Never got his autograph?
Unfortunately, no. Never got to exchange a word with him in this life. That's for sure. But not for lack of trying.
Have you met any of the others?
No, I have not met any of the Beatles. It will happen. I have come real close with Paul McCartney a few times. I have never spoken to him, although I do know one time he heard me yell because he was on the night of Ringo's 70th birthday. He was going into the concert at Radio City Music Hall. And I was standing outside because I didn't have a ticket. That's a complicated story. I won't go into. But anyway, he was going in. Everybody in the line was coming unglued. He was trying to ignore us. He walked past, and of course, I yelled, "Paul!" And he turned around, and I blew him a kiss, and he blew one back. So I know he heard me.
Paul pointed to me once at a concert.
There you go.
So, I mean, my life kind of reached its peak.
Well, if you meet him, it will really reach its peak. But, yeah. But have you ever spoken to Sarah Schmidt on your show?
I have not had Sarah Schmidt on my show yet.
Okay.
Emphasis on yet. I will. I'm gonna try and get her.
Yeah, Sarah has a story about Paul reading her sign at a concert, but I won't give it away.
I brought a sign to a Paul concert once, except I had written too small, and I could see him squinting trying to read it. And so my hopes kind of slowly shriveled up as I could see him trying to make out what it said.
He didn't have the glasses. What can I say? We went to another really good Beatles memory. Actually, is this must have been, I'm thinking 2002. I don't even know. Maybe it was later than that. I can't remember. But anyway, Paul did a poetry reading when his book Blackbird Singing came out. He did a poetry reading at the 92nd Street Y on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and I went with my friend. And he did an interview, which was edited down, and he read some of the poems. And when he got up to read, he took out a pair of reading glasses and put them on the end of his nose, and all these people were like, "Oh my God, Paul wears reading glasses!" And he looked over the top of the reading glasses at the audience and went, "We all get older," And then he read some poems and song lyrics, and that was an interesting experience because half the audience was Beatles fans and half the audience was little old ladies from the Upper East Side who go to the lectures at the 92nd Street Y who had no idea who this guy was. So it was an interesting experience. But yeah, he put the reading glasses on and people couldn't believe he had to use them, and it was like, well, what's wrong with that? He's over 50. Give me a break. There you go.
All right, and now here's I find it's the most interesting part of the show. No, it isn't, but it's my favorite part. It's time for some quick fire questions.
Okay.
What is your favorite Beatles song?
It changes daily.
What is your current favorite Beatles song?
I couldn't tell you because, like I said, it changes daily. Sometimes it changes hourly.
Okay. What are
whatever mood I'm in?
Top 5?
Top 5. Okay. Well, I could give you at least 3.
Okay.
Oh God. Now I feel fine. We can work it out. Please, please me. Oh gosh. I can give you the top 3. I can't give you. I Want to Hold Your Hand for sentimentality's sake. That's like my top 4. Top 5. Tough.
I mean, that's 3 more than I originally anticipated. So, 3 times the fun.
That's if pressed, Yeah. Tomorrow it'll be different. There you go.
That's the beauty. Mm-hmm. What is your least favorite Beatles song?
My least favorite Beatles song is Got to Get You Into My Life.
Explain. I
can't stand it. Well, for a variety of reasons. I can't stand it because back in the 70s when it was re-released, it was overplayed. It was overplayed to the point of pain. I didn't want to hear it anymore. I was annoyed with it. I actually liked Earth, Wind & Fire's cover, though they did a nice cover of it.
They did?
They did. And my brother was a big Earth, Wind & Fire fan, and that was kind of how I got into it. I heard that first and then went on to listen to other stuff by them, and I love Earth, Wind & Fire now, but, the song was overplayed to the point of pain around 1977. And then finding out the story behind it, and mind you, I don't have any problem with people smoking marijuana. This is not, I don't care. It's just that it kind of destroyed whatever I might have thought about the song. I was like, that's really what it's about? Give me a freaking break. And I was just like, I can't. And I really don't like that song. I really don't like that song.
Really? That's a first.
Yep.
And it's all because that 1976 re-release.
Yes.
Wasn't the B-side of that Helter Skelter for some reason?
I think so. I can't remember. I like Helter Skelter though.
Oh, I love Helter Skelter.
Rocker, man.
But it's
yeah,
fucking weird choice for a B-side to to get you into my life.
You know, back in the 70s, they were compiling stuff. There was the rock and roll.
Music, love songs.
Right. And all that. I mean, and this was all to capitalize on the fact that people had bought the Red Album, the Blue Album.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I have those albums. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
The rock and roll music one is really pretty funny when you look at if you look at the original cover design.
Oh yeah.
It's all 50s. It's like, what the heck?
And I heard a quote from Ringo saying like, "What the fuck is this?"
Pretty much.
Like, it cheapens us. The Beatles weren't cheap.
Yeah. And it looked really cheap. It was
with all the Coca-Cola glasses and the jukeboxes.
Yeah, it was just very But I mean, I own a copy of it. But you know,
that's the thing with us Beatles fans. We can trash something all we want. Mm-hmm. We probably own it.
Of course we do. Because,
oh yeah.
You know,
some own multiple copies of it.
Oh God.
Like myself.
Well, that's it. You know, and it you know, but that it was weird because it was just capitalized on. By the late 70s, people were starting to have interest again. Now, in the early...
Was that a pun?
What?
Capitalize.
No. It wasn't. I just said it. I didn't even think about it. Sorry.
You're a poet and you didn't know it.
Yeah, I disappointed you by telling you it wasn't a pun, I guess. But no.
You should have just said it was.
Well, yeah, but I'm honest, if nothing else.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was by the late 70s, people were starting to be interested again. But in the early to mid 70s, it was the height of uncool. You know, being a Beatles fan, God, I caught so much crap from people when I was in junior high. You know, why don't you like Led Zeppelin? Well, I do like Led Zeppelin now, but because the girl who used to give me shit for liking the Beatles, you know, was a Led Zeppelin fan, it took me a long time.
Led Zeppelin's awesome.
Of course they are. But, you know, when somebody's giving you grief because you like the Beatles and they like Led Zeppelin, you don't care.
It's like, why don't you like the Bay City Rollers?
I had a few of those, too. My friends, I mean, who gave me the Bay City Rollers are better than the Beatles.
Yeah. They're the next Beatles. Yeah, I tell you, these Osmonds, they're going to stay forever.
It's in the refrain since the Beatles broke up. Who were the next Beatles? There are no next Beatles. Let's be very frank here.
And it's still going on today with like BTS and all the new K-pop groups.
You know what? All those manufactured boy bands, nobody manufactured the Beatles except themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, you know, Brian Epstein refined it, but they didn't do anything they didn't want to do. And they formed themselves. They weren't formed by an impresario who wanted to make money. So,
yes.
Yeah, I would not equate the two. But anyway.
What is your favorite Beatles album? And you can pick between the US albums and the British albums.
The American version of Rubber Soul.
Okay. The one that starts off with, I've Just Seen a Face?
Yes. And that is because it is a perfect example of one of the few times that I believe Capitol did better. They created a very harmonious little folk rock album. And I'm not the only person who has said that. Ask Bruce Spicer about it sometime.
You know what? I'm one of the few people I dislike it's not that I'm indifferent, I dislike the US Capitol version of Rubber Soul.
Oh, that's funny.
Because
I love it. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm not saying you should. But
I mean, I always expect when I put on the record to hear Drive My Car and to hear I've Just Seen a Face from Help is just weird.
And to me, it's on Rubber Soul. See, like I told you, I get confused as to what's on the British albums. So
and then they put my favorite song from Help as the opener to side 2. It's Only Love.
Yeah, that's on Rubber Soul too. As far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's my favorite Beatles album for sure.
What is your least favorite Beatles album?
I don't know if I have one. I like them all.
You can pick compilations here.
But the compilations aren't bad because if they get people into the Beatles, that's okay.
There's significance in this.
Cheesy.
The significance doesn't matter in this scenario. It's one that you personally do not like.
It's a difficult question for me because I like them pretty much all. But I would definitely say probably the Rock and Roll Music Collection. It was just kind of pointless.
Yeah. And then they ended up splitting that into 2 compilations.
Yeah.
Which I have both.
And also, I'm going to say this, as much as I own them, the gazillion and one John Lennon compilations that seem to come out every month, there's probably going to be another one in October.
Oh, yeah.
He only had so much output. He's been dead for 40 years. Look, how many times can I buy another remix or rearrangement of every song he ever did? I've stopped because it's like, love you, John, but no. I can't keep spending my money on the same thing.
I'm not adverse to like the new remixes that are coming out because I like the sound of them for the most part.
Remixes are something else, though. Remixes I'm talking about re-releasing the same stuff.
Yeah, but they haven't done that in like couple years.
True, but who knows what's going to happen in October? Seriously, who knows?
Yeah, I'll probably buy it when it comes up.
And I'm talking a good game, but I'll probably do the same.
Yeah, us Beatles fans. Like I was telling Kid O'Toole about this, the Beatles singles collection. I didn't want to buy it. I was angry that Universal was milking the fans so dry. It's like, what are you gonna do now? Like weird picture sleeves from around the world? And by the time I had already finished that trail of thought, it was in my Amazon cart.
Of course, because it's what we do. It's what we do. We complain and then we do it anyway.
We complain because we love.
Exactly, and they know we're going to do it.
It's a money printer.
Unfortunately.
They could re-release that box set again this year with different picture sleeves, and it would sell just as much.
Better believe it. Believe it.
Because Beatles fans will buy anything.
Yep, we will. And we will. Which is frightening, but there you go.
I say this, I'm not on top of a soapbox here, because I'm one of them.
Of course. I mean, so I'm telling you, I don't do. Yeah, I do. Let's be very real here. I mean, I don't always, but yeah, I do. Yeah. We all do.
It's like, how many more copies of fucking Sgt. Pepper do I need?
I hear you.
You don't know until the next one comes out. Saying, this is the definitive version. I
never knew that I needed a monophonic vinyl copy of Sgt. Pepper until the guy who gave me the record collection gave me one.
Oh.
And how different it was from the stereo one. And then I went, yes, I need to own this. So, yeah.
My first copies of all of the Beatles albums on CD was back in 2011. My mom had gotten me the Beatles in Mono CD set. So that's how I experienced most of the albums in their entirety were mono. So I'll always prefer the mono to the stereo.
Yeah. And it's interesting, but you don't realize how you actually do need to own those things.
Oh, yeah. You need both.
Exactly.
All right. So, wow. This has been a good talk.
It has. It's been great. I've enjoyed talking to you.
I've enjoyed talking with you, too. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Fans on the Run. And, I guess we will see you next week with our guest, Piers Hemmingson. I think he's our guest. I'm 90% sure he is our guest.
You're in for a treat with Piers. He's a great historian and great guy.
So I guess ta-ta for now.
Bye all.
Fans on the Run is produced by Ethan Alexanian. Additional voiceovers by Richard Phillip. This has been a Showtown production.